Some people may know, or some may have never heard, that California was once depicted on maps as an island. Roughly up until the early 17th century, map makers had been illustrating California as a completely separate landmass from the continental portion of North America. Now, it must be noted that California, according to the scribes, had already been discovered by Europeans at least as early as 1579 by Sir Francis Drake, claiming the Pacific coast for England and naming the territory New Albion. However, many historians dispute his claims due to the fantastic nature of his narrative. The man who ransacked numerous Spanish ships and port cities on the Pacific Coastal Highway in his reported circumnavigation of the globe also claimed California for the English, along with tons of gold and other Spanish possessions. Some time ago, in the year 1937, a professor at Cal Berkeley claimed to have found a plate of brass that was directly connected to the Drake expedition. The plate stated, "By the grace of God, and in the name of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth and her successors forever, I take possession of this kingdom." Dated June 17th, 1579. Of course, if this is true, it would mean the west coast of North America was claimed before Jamestown, therefore establishing England's sea-to-sea claim over the North American continent first. But this still doesn't answer the question, why was California represented as an island? And there is still no proof that the brass plates said to be those of Sir Francis Drake are even legit, as they were later tested and determined to be a forgery using modern techniques. Keeping with this same plagiaristic energy, could these maps of California have been forgeries? When you ask the classical historian why California was depicted as an island, they will say California was illustrated as an island because the majority of land was undiscovered. They will also say that the island was mistaken for the peninsula of Baja California. It wasn't until halfway through the 17th century then did maps show California as part of the mainland United States. There is a legend that states that one day there will be a major catastrophic event and California will be no more. And though we can't entirely be sure exactly where this legend derives, the fact remains, it does exist.
Welcome to the great escape of 2020. There's more room when you're ready.
If cartographers of the time were mistaken as to the true nature of California, why were so many maps made with this exact same mistake? Why were the maps so detailed? And if this part of America was discovered after 1579, and most maps seem to depict the island of California prior to this year, why should we assume they are incorrect? Literally hundreds of maps, some not even centered around America, use the same illustration with some incredible amounts of detail. Even the names of islands and settlements in and along this mythical yet supposedly non-existent strait are labeled with astonishing consistency across the numerous examples at our disposal. So, the so-called experts say these maps are wrong. But what if they're wrong? What if we could prove it? Would that mean that California really was an island? And if that was true, is the body of water that separated California from the mainland really the Red Sea? And if this were true, that would mean America is Egypt.
I walk across high coals to show you my feet so you know I got soul. Top choice, underground rapper with the pop voice. They are not ready, they sweating, they not poised. I'm built for this, like pyramids. This is the shit kids put on their Christmas list. Everybody told me stay in my lane when they never took a trip to the place where I came from. Never saw the trees that my ancestors swang from. Never tried to understand where we got our slang from. Never felt the breeze of the slave master's whip.
It's time.
California is a catastrophe waiting to happen. This isn't just legend. According to geologists, this is a scientific fact. This area has an archaeological record of several flood events that ultimately altered the entire face of the earth. As maintained by the United States Geological Survey, megafloods occurred in the state of California in the years 212, 440, 603, 1029, 1330, 1418, 1605, 1750, 1810, and 1861. The USGS concluded that the 1605 flood had left a layer of sediment at least 2 inches thick in the Santa Barbara Basin, indicating that it was the worst flood event of the last 2,000 years. As a preemptive apocalyptic strategy, the USGS has constructed a doomsday scenario, ironically named the Ark Storm. The Ark Storm is described as a once in every 200-year event. The last Ark Storm flooded the entire Central Valley of California in 1862, and with it being over 150 years since the last cataclysm, geologists say California is well overdue for a massive deluge of biblical proportion. This cataclysm could result in the possible deaths of millions of people and the displacement of millions more. The Central Valley of lowland California will become an inland sea, and Los Angeles will become lost under the waves of the Pacific.
A megastorm strikes an American city. Levees fail, causing massive flooding. Thousands flee, but some don't make it out in time. It's a now familiar scenario, but in this case, it's happening in California.
Of the major metropolitan areas in this country, Sacramento is at the highest risk of catastrophic flooding.
Sacramento, California could be our next Katrina.
Part of the problem we have here is we have a couple thousand miles of old levees that were generally poorly built. And that's the legacy we have here.
Nearly 2 million people live in the Sacramento metropolitan area. It is the capital of California, the 7th largest economy in the world. Like New Orleans, Sacramento relies on a levee system to protect the city from flooding.
When we live in the shadow of levees and we look at these big, huge earthen embankments, we think that somehow it makes us safe. And what Katrina reminded us is that don't make it safe.
It would take just one large storm to begin a chain of events that would cause a mega disaster in California. This worst-case future scenario would begin with the Pineapple Express, a storm system that originates near the Hawaiian Islands and can last up to 10 days. Scientists estimate these massive rainstorms can hit the West Coast every 10 years.
It acts almost like a hose. It just squirts water, and wherever that hose is aimed is where you have the real potential to have major flooding.
Not only could the warm tropical storm dump 12 inches of rain on Sacramento, but it could also melt the snowpack in the mountains above the city.
So all that water, which is dumped very quickly, comes out of the mountains in a hurry. In less than 48 hours, it comes down. And of course, Sacramento is sitting right at the base of the mountain.
The 2 major rivers that flow through Sacramento could be overwhelmed by a monster storm surge. In turn, the levee systems on both rivers would fail, flooding the city.
Because the velocities are so high and the water depths are so high. When that occurs, that's when people get hurt.
As the storm surge roars through Sacramento, cars could be washed off the congested freeways. The Capitol building could be flooded, and the state government would shut down. More than 130,000 homes could be inundated by up to 15 feet of water in some neighborhoods. For the people caught in these floodwaters, some will be lucky enough to be rescued, but others may not be so fortunate. By the time it ends, hundreds of square miles of property could be devastated.
In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68, the text states that the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof he spake unto thee. This is one of the most misinterpreted verses in Scripture, and many people struggle with the meaning of the verse as it relates to the transatlantic slave trade. So let's investigate this entire verse specifically and break down its entire meaning. First, the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. This verse is indicative of repetition or a return to Egypt in a sense of both chronology and geography. Egypt represented bondage in a land only separated by a river from the promised land to the south. But when they exited the land, they had to cross a sea. And the Lord will bring thee into Egypt again with ships. This is a foreshadowing and prophecy of events in the past and events to take place in the future of that time. And again, Egypt is the location in which they will be sold. Both of these occurrences have already happened, and the children are scattered unto this day. Most people think of the scatter as pertaining specifically to the transatlantic slave trade. But what about the other seas? Were there no other people sold in the Pacific? By way whereof I spake unto thee is an important statement because it contradicts everything we are supposed to know about the modern world and map. For example, as most scholars will tell you, the majority of African slaves were traded from West Africa, which borders the Atlantic and is nowhere near the proximity of the Red Sea or Yam Suf. From the Targum, quote, "And the Lord will disperse you among all nations, from one end of the earth to the other. And you shall be tributaries to the worshippers of wood and stone, which neither thou or thy fathers have known.